Hey, Claire, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Brian. It's great to be here. So my name is Claire Chandler. I am the president and founder of a company called Talent Boost, which I established in 2013. And my specialty is in working with CEOs, founders, and owners to help them scale without the growing pains.
Cool. How'd you get interested in this?
Oh gosh, well, I'm a survivor of corporate America. So I got paroled or stepped away from corporate back in 2011, and just sort of jumped in with both feet to the consulting world. Not really having a plan, not really having a very crystallized vision of where I wanted to specialize. Took me a couple of years, and then I founded Talent Boost in 2013, and by then my niche was really helping smaller and growing, evolving companies, get to that next level, that next plateau. Surrounding themselves with the right people, leading in the right way, and I found that I really had a knack for that, of sort of whispering in the ear of the top leader and helping that person motivate and accelerate the performance of their people, by being as true to themselves as they could possibly be. So yeah, it's sort of a niche that I am passionate about and that I love, and looking to continue to do that.
And what do you typically see when you go in?
It kind of runs the gamut. So I use the phrase growing pains, right? So a lot of the companies that kind of reach out to me and say, we're not sure how we got into this mess. Can you help us fix it? Which is always people related, right? Because if we were employing robots, this would be pretty easy. But humans
people
are, well, I know they're humans are, they're uniquely brilliant and talented, but they are also by nature unpredictable, and it's hard to lead everybody in the same direction when everyone responds to different stimuli, right? Different incentives. And so often, these companies are at a pivot point or a transition point, and the biggest fire that's raging in front of them can vary from, they've just lost another star performer. They've grown a little bit, but they realize that the leadership structure they had when they founded the company may not be all the right people, but is certainly not the right structure. It's not the right way to make decisions and to, kind of propel the company forward. Often they're also seeing a rise in customer complaints and, a sort of related drop in profitability and innovation and competitive, market share. So the growing pains, the symptoms can vary, but the root cause is quite often the same.
Which is people not getting along, not aligned, not the right people.
It's those are also symptoms, believe it or not, not having the right people. I can't tell you how many CEOs will call me and say, will call me in thinking we just don't have the right people. And that may in fact be true, but let's not start there, right? Let's first figure out what it is that you're all about, because the growing pain, the root cause always boils down to there's a lack of clarity at the top. And what I mean by that is, a founder, an owner, a CEO has a very clear vision in their mind, a very clear picture of what they want their company to be about. But those that are going through this sort of this growing pain and this strain and this stress, what they find is it may be clear in their own head, but when you ask them to articulate that in words, either you can ask them 3 times on 3 different days and you get 3 completely different answers, or I've seen it happen where I'm in the room, I ask that question of the CEO, what's your vision, what's your mission for the company? And he or she will tell me, and the leadership team around the table is looking around going, okay, that's the first time I've heard that, right? So it absolutely starts with clarity and with focus around why are we in existence to begin with. Yeah. And then, we kind of work out from there.
And do you see a lot of finger pointing between departments? Is that one of the first things you see, or?
You do, and it's interesting because the larger the company, the thicker the walls of the silos, right?
Yeah.
I mean, no company starts out intending to build up these silos. It happens over time, and you know, and that's another thing that I hear, another refrain from CEOs. They'll say, you know, I can't get my guys to collaborate. What's going on? And I say, well, let me ask you a question. How do you incentivize them? And I get that sort of, you know, either dead silence on the phone or the deer in the headlights stare, because the reality is every leader, every founder wants their people to get along and to come together and to collaborate to achieve common goals, right? But we incentivize them to achieve individual targets that are specific to their team, to their division, to their location, to whatever. Well, if you tell me I want you to collaborate more effectively, but financially and otherwise and advancement wise, you reward me for achieving individual targets, which one am I going to go for first, right? Which one am I going to pour my energy into? And so a lot of it is kind of breaking down the, you know, it's not about throw out your compensation structure and start over. You know, I don't want people to get scared and say, oh my gosh, you know, now we've got to just sort of start from scratch. It's not about that. It's about kind of rewiring the leadership from the inside out to look at things from a different perspective.
And how do you diagnose all this?
It's a lot of conversations up front. You know, it's asking questions like that. You know, what's your mission? How, you know, do your people know that that's your mission? How do you know that they know? How do they show that they know? Right? It's sort of questions like that and probing. So it's a lot of qualitative discovery first. And then we start to get into more of the due diligence. And then we say, you know, show me your financial performance over the last couple of years. Show me your turnover, your employee turnover rate over the last couple of years, you know, month to month. You know, show me your profitability, your customer retention, you know, all of those different metrics that when you look at them singularly, you know, a lot of leaders just focus on the bottom line and they say, we're not as profitable as we need to be. Ergo, we have all the wrong people. Again, you might not. If you're not clear on where it is you're headed, how can you be sure whether the people that you have are the people that you need, right?
And when you ask about mission, do you often just get, this is who we are and what we do, versus that's not a mission, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I mean, and those are key components, right? I mean, they have to have a very clear sense of their identity, but you really have to drill into why they're in existence, what their true purpose is, where they're trying to go, and why that matters to them. And a lot of times, you know, part of what the growing pains are also about is they get sort of dragged down by the how, right? How are we going to get there? Okay, well, let's you know, slow your roll there, Chief. Let's first figure out, right, what, you know, where it is you're trying to head. And I keep harping on that, and it sounds so simplistic, but you know, what's the expression? It's the fattest pitch that a lot of leaders miss, because they're so used to, when they start out and they found a company, or they, you know, do a spin-off, or they add a division, they're so used to managing by chaos. And the smarter they are and the more entrepreneurial they are, the more they are prone to managing by chaos. And that's fine when you're a disruptor and you're a lone wolf. When you're trying to get people to follow you, they are not going to follow you for very long. Sometimes it's exciting for a week, you know, if we're going to be chaotic because we're brainstorming, we're creating, we're ideating, we're innovating, and all of this stuff. That's wonderful. Yeah. As a you know, if that goes along and that becomes quite obvious that that's your management style, you're going to lose people because they don't know which way you're going next.
And do you run into a lot of that, the entrepreneur myth, where, you know, the person starts, they're a craftsperson and they're very good at it, and then all of a sudden people start joining them, but they're bad at bookkeeping, they don't know what marketing is, they don't understand sales, and it doesn't scale? the E-myth, I
Well,
guess.
yeah.
Yeah. E-myth
Yeah,
stuff.
it's a huge problem because typically the smaller companies starting out, the startups, the founder based mentality, they are entrepreneurial. And I consider myself an entrepreneur, and we are control freaks, right? So we have sort of a clear vision in our head of what we want things to be like, and we think we've got to do everything ourselves. So we tend to be micromanagers, or we tend to want to control the details. Um, and again, that can show up as very chaotic management. But here's what's interesting: as these companies grow, they say, we need more people that think, with an entrepreneurial spirit, and we want them to think outside of the box, right? So what ends up happening is they advertise themselves that way. They promote that the company culture is entrepreneurial, and they hire people with that type of a promise that here you're going to be able to invent your own path and contribute in, exciting ways. And they hire these people under that promise, and then they stick them in a box and they say, don't color outside of the lines.
Yeah.
um, right? And so that's, but it's difficult because, again, they're not robots. If you truly want to hire a bunch of entrepreneurial thinking, creative types, you've got to manage them pretty closely, not micromanage them, but manage them in ways that harnesses the fact that you're going to have a bunch of different people kind of bouncing around creatively. And it's a difficult dance.
Yeah. And how do you get them to develop that mission that's clear, that's other people can buy into and believe? Because I've been at companies where the CEO would send around a card. This is now our mission. And I was like,
Oh boy,
the product doesn't do
how'd that
that.
go
It's like,
over? Yeah.
put that in the
Yeah.
trash, right? You're
Right.
like,
Right.
this is,
Yeah. And it's, um, there's not a simple answer to that question. As simplistic as it sounds, that you've got to get very clear on your mission, because the companies that sort of whip out that card, or, I've asked some of these CEOs, what's your mission? And immediately their head whips around and goes, which wall do I have that on? Because I know it's displayed, in one of those brass looking frames, and this is our mission and these are our values. That's not what I'm talking about when I say mission. That's a mission statement. And they probably paid really good money for someone to come in, have an hour-long conversation that maybe had a couple of people in it. And then they went off and they came back with some flowery statement that's actually a load of crap, right? Because it does not, it's not embedded in how things really are. It's not embedded in where we really want to go. And it's really just meant to appease the passerby who visits your website and says, okay, at a minimum, you've got to have a mission statement. Well, what does that mean to anybody?
yeah,
Right? So there's a lot of sort of rewiring of people by breaking down first their myths, right? Their beliefs about what a mission really is. And some companies, it takes a couple of hours to dig in, to sort of deprogram them and rewire them around a mission that is magnetic, that the senior leadership can buy into, and that they can go out and attract their employees to, right? With others, it takes a series of really deep conversations. Get all of that. You asked before, is there sometimes finger pointing? And sometimes there is. You get those senior leaders in a room and you say, let's put every elephant on the table that we need to, and let's get them resolved in and out of the way. Because by the time we leave this room, whether it's today or after a series of these sessions, you all need to walk out of here not towing the party line, but truly embracing what you're going to be all about and where you're headed. Because if your focus in a lot of these conversations is sales. If you don't believe it, you can't sell it, right?
well,
And
yeah.
that's a fundamental truth.
Yeah. And when I started my own business, I got the joy of being pulled into a lot of these companies where, oh, we got the wrong sales leader. Then you go and talk to the sales leader and go, the product doesn't work. Marketing doesn't work. You talk to the reps
Oh,
and they're like, nothing
yeah,
works.
yeah,
Nothing will work. And you're like, well, you sold something. right? How did that
Right.
happen? Right?
Right.
And you
Yeah.
kind of like debugging it, and you almost get, sometimes I just walked away because I'm not going to be able to fix this. And then you're going to hate me. And you're going to say, I
Right.
don't work.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's too easy, right? Is to hate the outsider who comes in to facilitate, because as soon as you leave the engagement, they can put it all on your shoulders and just go back to the way things were. Well, if the way things were had been working, they wouldn't have needed you in the first place,
Yeah.
right? And I find that as well. Companies that are, have a significant portion of their workforce or their focus on sales. Um, selling is relationship building, right? As we all know. But if you're not nurturing, you're not taking the same level of effort that you do to cultivate prospects, turn them into customers, and turn them into lifelong raving fans. If you don't take that same level of effort and attention to nurture the relationships with your operations folks, your marketing team, your finance, it's the same thing, right? It's if you can't just turn around and finger point and say, well, the product's defective, but I did my job and I sold it to ABC company.
Yeah.
If you don't nurture that relationship, it's going to break down, and it's ultimately going to impact your reputation on the front lines, and it's hard to repair.
And do you find a lot of founders and or leaders have their own agenda, right? They're either lifestyle people, or they're looking just to pull as much money out of this as possible. They don't live near the home office. They live in some resort area, and they're
Yeah.
not, they wonder why people don't respect them or do what they say.
Yeah, yeah, I have seen that. I continue to see that. And the reason for that is, a lot of companies make the mistake, especially those who are looking for sales folks on the front end. They make the mistake of hiring what they deemed to be a superstar.
Yeah.
Um, and a superstar in one company may not be a superstar in yours. An A performer today in your company may not truly be an A performer once you get crystal clear on your mission, right? And so it's those companies that go out and hire, the superstar rainmaker sales folks who are never going to step off of their yacht, to really drive your culture in positive ways and move the needle toward your mission. Because you're right, they're in it to make their commission or whatever, and there's nothing wrong with that for certain
Yeah.
people, right? But if you're looking to build something, and every founder that I know is a builder, you want to make sure that you hire the right talent, not just the best talent. And the only way to know that they're right is if you're clear on your mission. Everything comes back to that.
And so is it mission then culture in your eyes?
It 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 is. To me, a lot of people will believe that culture sort of bubbles up from the bottom organically. But it's my experience that the greatest impact on culture is the behavior of its leaders,
Yeah.
right? Because employees see what's rewarded, they see who advances, and they see what behavior is not tolerated. And oftentimes, there's a gross amount of tolerance for a lot of bad behavior, because maybe people are hitting their numbers and driving in revenue for the company, and that's wonderful for this quarter and next quarter. But are they causing damage to your workplace culture? So that's why having the right leadership at the top that is completely aligned with the vision and the mission for the company. That's you could leader behavior is infectious, and it is just as infectious if it's positive behavior as if it's toxic behavior. And unfortunately, we see in a lot of companies that it's toxic behavior, and it's sort of like mold in the walls, right? It's really hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to spot. So you have to be really, really diligent about, from the top down, making sure that the people who are leading, the people who are setting the tone for your culture, get it. They're genuinely on board with it, and they're going to do whatever it takes to sort of advance that mission.
And let's say, have you ever had a case where the leader, you just said you shouldn't be in this role? You might be the great technician or the visionary, but not the executor, right?
Yeah.
Because as a company gets bigger, there's there's HR, there's operations, there's accounting, a lot
Right.
of administrative stuff that a lot of founders find boring.
That's
And,
right.
and I think there's a classic thing going on now where you got founder and then a COO, somebody who
Right.
gets the trains to run on time, make sure everything gets paid, everything's working, while the founder works on the vision and
Right.
keeping everybody excited about it. Kind of like, I hate to say the word den mother, but the person who makes sure things get
Yeah,
done, like the
absolutely.
Sheryl Sandberg type thing,
That's
where,
right.
and I
Yeah.
see nothing wrong with that.
No, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it's unfortunately, it's the rare founder who recognizes, again, we're control freaks, right? We think we have to do everything if we're the CEO. It's the rare founder who recognizes that he or she is not meant to run all facets of the business and actually acts on that and brings in somebody else. It's why we're seeing, the rise of the concept of the fractional CEO or even CFO. It's what ends up happening. What you have to do, and what I have had to do in some of those cases, is really work with that founder to get much more self-aware. So not only clarity on your mission, but as a founder, the company is an expression of its founder, right? The culture is a manifestation of that founder's personality. And especially in the early days, the vibe in the office, the vibe around, the treatment plants or the facilities or what have you, is directly impacted by the mood of the founder. Yeah. So, I have done and continue to do a lot of work with founders who are in that place where they say, well, I have to be a CEO, which means, or I am the CEO. I want to be the CEO, which means I have to do all of these things. I have to be the HR head and the accounting head and the operations head. And the answer is no, you don't. Let's figure out what your lane should be, what your genius zone is. And you can call yourself anything you want, the founder, the CEO, the chief, the chief happiness officer, whatever you want, and still be, the visionary and the strategic person. Let's figure out what your fast lane is and get you out of all of the other stuff.
Yeah. And that's a piece.
And then watch the brakes come off, right? I mean, then you're really flying.
Yeah. I mean, Apple did that really well with Tim Cook. I mean, he was a pure operations guy. And guess what Steve Jobs isn't?
That's exactly right. And he's an ass. He was an ass. Nobody likes to work for him, but they loved his vision, right? So let's separate him from the direct management.
But the engineers knew what Steve wanted.
Right.
And they worked their butts off to please him. But operating such a big company is a full-time job.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That personality is very different.
Yeah. And Elon Musk is a great other example of that. This is a guy who was an absolute genius that people want to be in his orbit, but he is not a direct people manager. You don't want to encumber him with that. His genius is in literally saying, we want to colonize Mars. I am tired of waiting for other people to figure out how to do it. We're going to do it, right? And let me bring in some other people around me who can figure out the particulars of finding the right people to get on board with that and move the needle. But he's the idea guy, right? But he's very self-aware, and that's a key thing.
And what I've seen a lot is when because I typically worked with engineers who came up with a product, want to be CEO, and they go, well, just fix sales, right? Or sell what we have. And they didn't understand sales at all. And they would just want to outsource it in a way, necessary evil. And I never saw those people succeed because who did succeed is, let me go on, they did the first $1 million of revenue.
Right.
So they were out selling it themselves. And then they built sales team around them because they understood what the customer wanted. And guess what they did? They went back and made the product do what the market wanted, not what the engineers wanted.
Right.
And that was
I mean, if you view your sales arm as a necessary evil to bring in revenue, you're never going to build a company of your dreams, because they have to be an extension of you, right? Yeah. As you grow, as you scale, you can't do everything yourself. You weren't meant to, which is why you brought on staff to begin with. But if you see your sales arm as just, some way to bring in money, no matter how they do it, you're really missing a huge opportunity, because properly empowered, that sales arm really becomes the research and development and innovation lab for your company, because they are the most direct conduit to what your customers are saying they need next. Not what they needed yesterday, not what's working today or not working, what they need next. And if you're not, if you haven't empowered and infused in your sales force what your mission and vision are for the company, they're just going to go out and sell whatever's going to make their quota and get you off their back.
And which leaders or CEOs inspire you, where you say, boy, that person gets it?
Sorry, say the beginning of that again.
Which leader or CEO inspires you, as far as like who really gets it?
So the greatest CEO you've never heard of is a CEO that I had the major honor to work for back in my corporate days. He was a gentleman named Tony Harding. He's a Welsh. If you call him British, he gets offended, but he's a Welshman, and he came into the company that I worked for at the time, right after a period of, kind of going internal and downsizing and all this stuff. And it was his last CEO assignment before he moved on to be chairman, and then he retired. So this was a very seasoned CEO. This was not his first rodeo. He was not making it up as he went along. I've seen some CEOs. I worked for a CEO once who literally went to business school at night and would bring that chapter of his class into, the next day with, here's the new thing we're going to be all about. Let's put together a committee. So great. But Tony came in and he said, the first month, he didn't do any changes. He didn't change the executive leadership team. He went around to every employee location he could get to, and he did a listening tour. And he said, I know you guys have been through a rough patch. I want to know everything on your mind and what you would change about the company if you had the power to do so. And he emerged out of that listening tour. And he said, we are going to be about three things: employees, customers, and efficiency. That's it. Did you hear any flowery language around that?
Pretty simple, isn't it?
It was so simple. And every single person from the C-suite down to the frontline union worker could attach some meaning between what they did as their individual role to at least one of those three pillars. And he retired several years ago now. And I guarantee you, if you walked up to anybody in that company who worked for him then and is still there, and you asked them what were Tony's three key pillars, they would be able to tell you. So, what was great about him, plus he had a ridiculously irreverent sense of humor. So I just loved the guy. But he was such an effective CEO because he kept it simple, right? And it was in a way that connected everybody, because we could all see how we could make a positive impact to at least one, if not all three of those pillars.
And I think that's the key difference between a great leader and an okay leader, that listening tour.
Yeah.
Because, when I worked for great leaders, that's what they did. They didn't go around trying to tell you what we're doing. They tell me what's going right and wrong and how we can fix it. And if I didn't get it, they explain why it is the way it is.
Right.
And that's great skill. Hey, this has been a fun conversation. Where can people go to follow you and learn more about your work?
It's been awesome. They can find me at clairechandler.net. There are places on there to connect with me, and there's a bunch of really great free resources they can download and start applying to their business right away.